back in session. You may be seated. Your Honor, can I have P and Q marked as the next exhibits in the trial?
Okay. Thank you.
And with the court's permission, I'd like to display these one above the other.
Okay.
Okay. Sergeant Good, you have previously testified about the details in these reports. You would agree that each of these reflects your report. It says Reporting Officer Sergeant Sean Good, correct?
Yes.
Each of these is page 1 of your report, correct?
Yes.
You've previously testified that you call that the face sheet of the report, correct?
Yes.
Each of these has the identical incident number and call number, correct?
Yes.
The identical date and time reported, correct?
Yes.
The identical report date and time, correct?
Yes.
And of course, the identical officer.
Yes.
Other than the print date of the face sheet of your report, one appears to be in January, one appears to be in October, the major change is the photo that's included on the face sheet, correct?
Yes. Can I explain why?
So that second photo with the piece of tail light that is included on the first page of your report, that photo is not from January 29th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
You never took a photo of a piece of taillight on January 29th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
You never saw a piece of taillight at 34 Fairview on January 29th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
Did you personally switch the photo on the face sheet of your police report?
No.
Do you know who did?
So whoever updated the report, their supplemental, you add photos.
But in answer to my question, do you know the specific person from your department who altered the photo on the face sheet of your report?
I didn't take the supplemental report, so I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know who took the photo.
But given that this is your report, you're the reporting officer, you are responsible for the content of that report, are you not?
For my report, yes, not other officers' supplementals to an investigation.
All right, but this is your report. This is the face sheet for the reporting officer, Sergeant Sean Good, is it not?
Yes, on the face sheet.
All right. Now, would you agree with me that someone reading this report and seeing that the date and time of the report is listed as January 29th of 2022 at 8:24 a.m., that's when you wrote it, correct?
That's when I logged in, yes.
Somebody reading that and seeing a photo of a piece of taillight might believe that that photo is from the same date that you're writing the report, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you think it's misleading to include a photo on the face sheet of the report when the report is dated January 29th, 2022, and the photo is not from that date, it's from sometime later?
Objection.
Sustained.
Is there anything on what is now marked Exhibit 44 on that face sheet that indicates the date and time that that photo on Exhibit 44 was taken?
No.
Is there anything on Exhibit 44, that face sheet of your report, that indicates that it applies to some supplemental report that was later filed?
No.
I may have a moment.
Yes.
Nothing further, thank you.
All right, please take the exhibit down. And we need that exhibit, Mr. Yannetti.
Oh, yes, of course. We have two others as well,
Okay, the exhibits are to remain up here with the clerk.
with the clerk.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, go right ahead, Mr. Lally.
Thank you. So Sergeant Good, turning back to some questions you were asked yesterday in regard to Christopher Albert and whether or not he was a town selectman, is that correct?
Yes.
And he is currently, is that correct?
Yes.
And was he on January 29th of 2022?
No.
So he was elected to the Board of Selectmen subsequent to this date that you've been talking about, on January 29th, 2022, correct?
Yes.
Now, the location where you were directed to where Mr. O'Keefe had been located just after 6 a.m., where was that in relation to the property line between 34 Fairview Road and the home next door?
If I had a guess, probably 10, 12 feet to the property line.
Now, you were asked some questions about having been to that residence at 34 Fairview Road prior. And you indicated that you had been there years ago with Sergeant Lang, is that correct?
Yes.
And what was that in regard to, sir?
It was a hit and run investigation.
And who, if anyone, so why were you at that residence at 34 Fairview Road?
So there was a call for a motor vehicle crash at the corner of Dedham and Washington Street, and the suspect vehicle had fled the scene. Officer Lank was my partner that night. He followed the oil spill of the vehicle down Dedham Street, up Cedar Crest, all the way down to the intersection of Cedar Crest to Fairview, and the oil spill actually drove into 34 Fairview, where we found the vehicle.
And who, if anyone, did you, through your investigation, who, if anyone, did you associate with operating that vehicle?
That'd be Tim Albert.
And was Mr. Timothy Albert, was he charged in reference to that incident?
Yes, he was.
And do you know approximately when that was?
It was in 2009. I don't know the exact date, but I know the year.
Now, as far as your report, you asked a number of questions about that. But I'm sorry, before I get to that, you had testified earlier that when you were leaving the scene, there was an amount of snow that had compiled on your windshield, correct?
Yes.
And after leaving the scene, what if anything happened with the snowfall sort of throughout the course of the day?
Our windshield was completely covered. We had to take time, clear off our windshields. It had snowed considerably.
And then following that, throughout sort of the course of the rest of the day and the afternoon, what, if anything, did you observe about the snowfall at that point?
It continually got worse.
Now, as far as your report is concerned, what you were shown and what you've seen, has there been any change as far as your narrative in reference to who you talked to, what they said, anything of that effect?
No.
You've been asked a bunch of questions about what you called a face sheet. Can you explain to the jury sort of what a face sheet is and sort of how that comes into being?
Easiest way, it's the top sheet of the report. It's not the actual meat of the report. It just gives you the date and time. Usually, if you can fit it on the front of the sheet, it would be the first party would be involved. If there was a suspect, defendant, and that's it. It would be their name, date of birth, social security number, all of their personal information.
So, as far as you were saying, sort of the meat of the report, it has no real relation to that, correct?
Correct.
Now, you were handed two exhibits or two parts of the report, and you were told to ignore the date that they were printed, correct?
Correct.
And so, what, if any, significance would the date that they were printed have in relation to what's on a face sheet?
So in this case, there was supplemental reports done after the 29th. So those reports were added to my initial report. You can add a supplemental narrative. So if that includes meeting new people, talking to other people, or taking photos of anything you found, you would add that to our report, and it would be documented in the supplemental.
And you had offered, I believe, a couple times to explain to the jury sort of why a photo might be different from one face sheet when it's printed versus a subsequent date when the face sheet is printed. Can you explain to the jury at this time sort of why would that be different?
So when that face sheet was printed, if photo number one was the top photo, and now there was a new photo added, that could be now the top photo on that face sheet when it was printed.
And how would that be something that someone would physically go in and do, or is that something that sort of within the system automatically occurs, if you know?
I don't know how the system numbers the photos. So we added our photos on January 29th, and then any photos subsequent to that were added. I don't know how the software would put them 1 through 20 or how many there were.
Nothing further on.
Okay,
If I might,
very briefly.
you had just talked about how Tim Albert was charged as a result of the investigation that you did years ago, correct?
Yes,
The evidence in that case, you would agree with me, was strong against Tim Albert for that crime, was it not?
for leaving the scene, yes.
Sure. Sergeant Blank actually was able to follow the trail of fluid from the accident scene right to 34 Fairview, correct?
Yes,
And Tim Albert admitted that he got nervous and left the scene, correct?
correct.
All right. Now, despite the fact that he was charged, are you aware that the case was just flat out dismissed upon restitution?
Objection, move to strike, Your Honor.
The objection sustained.
Nothing further.
Jurors, you're to disregard that. All right, you're all set, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Who is your next witness, Mr. Lally?
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth will call Sergeant Michael Lang to the stand.
All right, so not yet. I'll see counsel at sidebar, please. It's important to the defendant's case. So tell me exactly, based on the voir dire yesterday, exactly what you hope to get into.
Thank you, Your Honor. With regard to the voir dire yesterday, my intention is to closely mirror my questioning of Sergeant Lank with my questioning of him on voir dire. In other words, the fact of the fight, the fact of Chris Albert's involvement in the fight, the fact of his getting involved in the fight, called officers to assist him, the specifics of the allegations of the Lopalito brothers as to his conduct, what they alleged he did, the part that he took in the fight, their subsequent release from the scene, going back into the Canton Police Department to file or lodge a complaint, the fact that they were turned away for the complaint, there were subsequent police reports filed, and the local...
So I don't have those, right? You didn't send them to us?
We got those. We got those
All
last
right,
night.
it's too late for the police reports, but go ahead and finish what you've got.
Right, wait, just so the court knows, as the court requested, we provided those to the judicial assistant last night.
Who's the judicial assistant?
Yeah, like, Mr.
Is this Lololitos?
Lopalito. Yeah.
Go ahead after the police report.
So basically, Your Honor, and I don't have any interest in introducing the police reports. I just need the timing. In other words, there was the fight, the complaint, the police reports were filed after the complaint, and then they were charged after the police reports. And then the subsequent resolution of the matter. The fact
So what do you mean by subsequent revolution of the matter?
they were adjudicated not guilty, and ultimately the subsequent witness intimidation request by Sergeant Lank was thrown out by the DA. With regard to what was brought up by Mr. Lally yesterday, I intend to include and elicit in my questioning of Sergeant Lank the issue concerning Tim Albert and the resolution of that issue.
Well, Mr. Yannetti just did that.
Well, he didn't because the court struck it.
Yeah. It should not have been done.
Well, Your Honor,
go ahead.
Respectfully, the Commonwealth left the jurors with a misimpression intentionally.
So
His last question was, and he was charged. That's true, he was charged. And then those charges were dismissed subsequent thereto.
all right, but this was specific. We should have, and it wasn't objected to, right? So Mr. Lally's question wasn't objected to. All right, so is that the end of what you intend to get into?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Lally, do you want to, you're objecting to all of this?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Do you want to be heard specifically on anything?
No, Your Honor.
All right. So what I'm going to allow you to get in is the relationship of Sergeant Lank with the Alberts. But keep in mind, Mr. Jackson, the Alberts are not all one entity. So you must do it individually, and simply because the witness had a relationship with Chris Albert doesn't mean that it has any bearing on favoritism or bias to Brian Albert or to Tim Albert. So you have to do them individually. I'll give you some leeway on the incident itself, but keep in mind the particulars of the fight isn't really what matters here. It's the fact of the fight and the intervening of Sergeant Lank on behalf of Chris Albert as it's relevant to bias or favoritism. So if there are objections that you get beyond, you may be stopped. You can get when and where it happened, that it happened outside a bar where the witness had been drinking. He did not acknowledge your drinking buddy's comment, so you're not to specifically say that, where you just said you're going to outline what you did yesterday, and that this occurred in Canton. The role, if any, he had in handcuffing or having the Lopalitos put in custody, and the fact that Mark Lopalito went to the Canton Police Department to file a report. What you cannot get into is the mobile gas station incident, because I didn't hear anything yesterday that the conduct of Sergeant Lank had anything to do with the Alberts. I'm not convinced that it wasn't merely self-interest on his part. So that's out. That was 22 years ago. Nothing, so you're not getting into the federal investigation that he was sued. I'm not letting you get into the not guilty because it's speculative. Who knows why he was found not guilty, why they were found not guilty. You cannot get into that. There are all kinds of reasons people can be found not guilty. Whether I allow more depends on the testimony, the direct and the cross. So you are to go no further than that without leave of court. So the Commonwealth can then get into the animosity between the witness Sergeant Lank and Brian Albert because of the arrest of Tim Albert. But if, Mr. Lally, if you open the door to something further, I need to be seen at sidebar before anybody can come get into that. So, Mr. Jackson, you did this in 10 minutes yesterday. I don't expect you to take 2 hours to do this, okay? And just as an aside again, let's not waste the jury's time with repetitive testimony.
I don't intend to, Your Honor. I think I understand the court's, the parameters. The one thing I didn't hear the court say, but I think it was implied, but I want to make sure I'm clear. I can get into the fact that there was a complaint sought, and then there were subsequent police reports filed.
Not the police,
Citation.
I didn't hear anything yesterday about the police reports. I haven't seen them. So that the complaint was sought and that subsequent to that, they were summoned and had to go to court.
And the dates of the police reports that were filed?
You can say the dates without saying the police reports. So they went into the station to file a complaint. They were told they couldn't file a complaint on those 2 days, right?
Correct.
And then the witness did testify that he filed a report, but it was that he had told his sergeant the night before of this incident, and the sergeant said, you don't have to file a report until you come back or something like that.
So I'll just ask, were the reports dated after the initial complaint was requested? And I can
Okay.
leave it at that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I'll give you all a 5-minute break, and then we have to get going.
All rise for the court, please. back in session. You may be seated.
So, Mr. Jackson, you'll just alert me before you begin that line of questioning because I have an instruction.
Of course.
Okay. All right, Mr. Lally, your next witness, please.
Yes, Your Honor, the Commonwealth will call Sergeant Michael Lank to the stand.
Okay.
Just going to ask you to be mindful to step up and to remain standing to be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear the evidence you give the court and jury in the case down here and to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
Morning.
Down, little microphone right up.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Michael Lank, L-A-N-K.
And how are you employed, sir?
I'm a lieutenant with the Canton Police.
And how long in total have you been a member of the Canton Police?
Over 24 years.
And how long have you held the rank of lieutenant with the Canton Police?
It'll be 2 years in August.
Now, prior to, well, let me ask you first. With reference to your responsibilities as a lieutenant, if you could explain to the jury just in general terms, what are your duties and responsibilities as a lieutenant?
I oversee the gun licensing and patrol.
And prior to working as a lieutenant, what was your role with the Canton Police before that?
I was a detective sergeant.
And how long were you a detective sergeant?
From September of 21 until August of 22.
And during that time frame as a detective sergeant, what were your duties and responsibilities with regard to the Canton Police at that point?
To oversee the Detective Bureau, ensure that all reports were issued to respective detectives and completed.
Now, you're also familiar with the role within the Canton Police of a sort of shift sergeant, is that correct?
Yes.
And if you could explain to the jury sort of what are the differences between what a shift sergeant does and what a detective sergeant does?
Shift sergeant's primary responsibility is to run the daily shift, give out sectors to each of the cars, and dispatch cruisers to appropriate areas, so forth.
And if I could turn your attention to the morning of January 29th, 2022. At some point after 6 a.m., did you receive a call in regard to a dispatch that your department had received?
Yes.
And who, if anyone, called you around that time?
Sergeant Sean Good.
Do you know approximately what time Sergeant Good called you?
I believe it was 6:08.
And with reference to that call, the initial call from Sergeant Good, what, if any, information did he relay to you at that time?
Sergeant Good stated that there was a gentleman found in the snow at 34 Fairview Road, and he was in very grave condition, and he brought it to my attention that he was also a Boston police officer.
And subsequent to that, through the course of your investigative work on this case, did you learn who that unresponsive male was?
Yes.
And who did you learn it to be?
John O'Keefe.
And upon receiving that call, where did you go?
I went to 34 Fairview Road.
And if you know, about what time would you estimate that you arrived in the area of 34 Fairview Road?
I live fairly close, so I was on scene by, I believe it was 6:24, 6:25.
And upon your arrival, who, if anyone else, from your department was there prior to you?
Officer Sarif, Officer Mullaney, and Sergeant Good.
And when you arrived, beyond sort of the other officers from your department, what, if any, other activity or what, if any, other persons did you observe on scene?
When I arrived, I observed that the ambulance was still there. There was multiple EMTs, and I observed some witnesses also.
And with respect to the ambulance, it's your understanding Mr. O'Keefe was in that ambulance?
Yes,
And did you ever see Mr. O'Keefe on that one?
I did not.
And at some point, the other officers who preceded your arrival, did they direct you your attention to where Mr. O'Keefe was found when they first arrived?
They did.
And where was that sort of in relation to the property, as you recall?
If you're looking at 34 Fairview Road, it was on the left side of the property, about 8 feet from the road.
And in that sort of general area, what, if any, sort of landmarks or other sort of items in that area of the front yard did you observe?
I observed a flagpole. There was a fire hydrant and some brush area over there.
And upon your arrival on scene, who was the first person that you spoke to?
Sergeant Sean Good.
And you had some conversation with him, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then following talking to Sergeant Good, who, if anyone else, did you speak to on scene?
I spoke to Jennifer McCabe.
And where was it in relation to the scene that you first spoke to Jennifer McCabe?
I believe I spoke to Jennifer McCabe right in front of Mark Cruiser 683, which was assigned to Officer Sarif.
And then about how long a conversation was that initially with Ms. McCabe?
I would say probably 8 or 9 minutes.
And in addition to Ms. McCabe, what, if any, other sort of civilians did you observe in that area around that time?
I observed Kerry Roberts, and I don't recall seeing anybody else at the scene while I was focused on Ms. McCabe.
Now, with respect to Jennifer McCabe, I'll strike that. So after you spoke with Ms. McCabe for 8 or 9 minutes, then who, if anyone else, did you speak to at that time?
So after I spoke with Ms. McCabe, I believe I was able to then contact the CPAC unit.
And what is the CPAC unit?
CPAC unit is the investigative division for the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office.
Why did you contact them?
Because I was made aware at some point that it did not appear that Mr. O'Keefe was going to survive, and I wanted them to be aware of the situation.
And did they respond at that time?
No.
Now, with reference to, is that sort of a typical protocol, or what, if any, sort of typical protocol would you have responding to a scene of this nature?
Yes, any sort of scene where it appears that
admonition each day as we break for the day. When we concluded yesterday, we were done with a witness, and I believe the state is prepared to call its next witness. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And who is the witness and who will be examining the witness, Ms. Blake?
I will be examining the witness, Zulema Pastenis.
Very well. The state may call its next witness.
Or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth.
Thank you.
All right. The court will note now the witness has been sworn. Before we begin with any testimony, I am going to inquire, Ms. Pastenis, because this trial has been live streamed and available fairly easily to observe online and also open to the public, I'm asking you whether or not you have watched any of the trial or anyone's testimony given during the trial.
No, I have not.
Okay. Have you talked to anybody else about testimony they've given in trial?
No, I have not.
Okay, thank you for your responses. Ms. Blake, if you'd like to inquire on direct, you may do so.
Thank you, Your Honor. Will you please spell your name for the record?
My first name is Zulema, spelled Zulema. Last name Pastenes, Pastenes.
And Ms. Pastenes, do you know an individual named Lori Vallow?
Yes.
How do you know her?
I met her in 2018 at a meeting in at Melanie Gibbs' house.
So you knew Melanie Gibb prior to meeting Lori?
Yes.
And do you know approximately when that would have been, what year?
It was around 2018.
Sometime shortly after meeting Lori, did you end up traveling to a conference in St. George, Utah?
Yes.
And was that in October of 2018?
Yes.
Do you know an individual named Alex Cox?
Yes.
And how did you meet him?
I met him at Lori's house in November of 2018 after a conference.
And how about Chad Daybell?
I met him at a conference in Mesa in the summer of 2018.
When you met Chad in the summer of 2018, did you end up staying in contact with him at that time?
No.
And after meeting Lori in 2018, did you stay in touch with her?
Yes, it was brief contact at first, and then after the St. George conference, then we started having more of a friendship.
And in regards to that St. George conference, did you travel there with Lori?
Yes,
Were there some other women with you in the vehicle?
yes.
Do you recall who they were?
It was Michelle, and then another lady that I don't remember her name, Melanie Gibb, Lori, and I.
Do you recall being present when Lori and Chad met?
Yes, I was there.
Did you make any observations of the two of them together during that conference?
Yes, at first it was just they were just talking to each other, but then Lori was really being flirtatious towards him, and it appeared that she was really putting on the moves on him.
Did Chad seem receptive to that?
Yes, because he was very giggly and laughing a lot with her.
Were you aware if Lori was married?
Yes, I knew she was married.
And did you know whether or not Chad was married at that time?
I knew he was married.
Did you also travel home from the conference with Lori?
Yes, I did.
Do you recall her saying anything on the drive home?
Yes, she was driving on the way back, and Melanie Gibb and I were in the back seat, and she asked us to search the scriptures for certain things. The first things that she had us research was anything to do with James the Less, and then she also had us research a scripture, and that was Doctrine and Covenants 77:11, and she had us read it out loud for her.
At that time, did you learn the significance of the James the Less?
Not at that time. She didn't expand on that time.
At some point later, did you learn the significance of that?
Yes, Lori said that Chad had told her that in a
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. Calls for hearsay.
Your Honor, it's a conspirator.
Overruled.
Um, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
And I had asked you if at some point later you learned the significance of the James the Less.
Thank you. Yes, Lori said Chad had told her previous lives, and in a previous life, she had been, they had been married, and he was James the Less, who was one of Jesus's disciples, and that she was his wife, and her name in that life was Helena.
And in regards to the other scripture reference, the D and C, did you ever learn the significance of that?
Yeah, it was in regards of the gathering of the 144,000. And Chad had told her that they were the angels that were supposed to gather the 144,000.
And when you say Chad told her they, is the they referring to Chad and Lori?
Correct.
And then you talked about meeting Alex Cox at a conference in November of 2018 in Arizona.
Yes.
Was Chad also present at that conference?
Yes.
Was Lori present?
Yes.
Was there any other activity or get together held around that time?
Yeah, Lori had some people from the conference that were staying at her house. And after the conference, she had a gathering at her house, and she invited me to attend.
Did you in fact attend?
Yes.
While you were there, did you make any observations of Chad and Lori together?
The three of us went outside to the backyard together, and at one time, Lori started playing basketball and asked Chad to play basketball with her. It was very uncomfortable for me because I felt like a third wheel. So I said that I was going to go inside the house, and Chad said that he was going to go inside the house with me. And Lori said, why are you going inside? Are you scared of me?
And you said you felt like a third wheel in that situation?
Yes.
At some point during that meeting, were you given a blessing?
Yes.
Who gave you the blessing?
Chad.
Who was present in the room where he gave you the blessing?
Chad, Lori, and I.
Do you recall getting that blessing?
Yes, I do.
Was there anything different about that blessing than what you were used to?
Yeah, usually when we receive a blessing, it is tailored to the specific need that you may have at that time. For example, if I was ill, the blessing will be for healing or strength to go through the illness. This blessing was different. It was almost as if Chad was looking into the future for me, and he was telling me how special of a person I was, and how many gifts I had, and all the things that I was going to do in the future. So it was very, very different than what I was used to.
And it sounds like talked about your future and how special you were. Was it pretty praising of you?
Yeah, there was a lot of praise during the blessing.
At some point during that gathering at Lori's house, do you recall Chad teaching, providing any teachings to the people that were at Lori's residence?
Yeah. So at one point, a couple of people had asked a couple of questions of Chad, and he sat in the middle of the room. I don't know whether it was a coffee table or ottoman in the middle of the living room, and all of us were sitting on the couch, and he started teaching the doctrine of translation.
And when you say all of us were sitting there, how many of you were there? Do you recall? Or approximately?
Probably around 6, 7 people.
Were there any other men there?
No, it's only women.
Charles wasn't present?
No, Charles had gone out of town and taking JJ with him so that Lori could have the house for guests.
And when the women sat there, Chad was the one talking about translation, is that correct?
Yes.
Did Lori teach about translation?
No.
And do you recall some of what Chad was telling you about translation?
Yes, he said that there was there were 3 phases to translation. The first was the I'm sorry, I can't remember it correctly, but it was something like there was a physical part, there was a spiritual part, and the third part I can't remember. And then he said that each one of the parts you went up on vibration and percentages, in that at each time when you hit 100, then you would move on to the next phase and on to the next phase.
Had you ever heard translation taught in that way?
No, never.
At that point in time, were you open to the idea?
Yeah, I was open to it.
Do you recall seeing Chad again in November around that same time? And maybe I'll narrow it down. Do you recall seeing Chad and Lori somewhere the day after the conference?
Thank you. Yes, the day after the conference, Lori was supposed to have some kind of a, I don't know, meeting or classes at her house. And I decided not to go there. Instead, I decided to go to the temple. And when I got to the celestial room, Lori and Chad were sitting together in the celestial room.
Did either of them say anything to you at that time?
They both stood up at the same time and they came over to me, towards me as soon as they saw me. And Lori said to me not to tell anyone that I had seen them there. He said, please don't tell anybody that we are here.
Later in 2018, do you recall going to Melanie Gibbs' home and having Chad and Lori be there?
Yeah, there was Lori and Gib had started a podcast, I believe, and Chad was going to be a guest for their podcast on that day.
And I said later in 2018. Do you recall, was it early 2019 or later in 2018? Do you recall?
I don't recall when it was.
But sometime after November of 2018?
Yes, it was after the conference.
And would it be fair to say that it was before February of 2019?
Judge,
Correct.
this is becoming leading objection.
Okay, well, it was untimely, but it was leading, Ms. Blake.
So at that podcast at Gibbs' house, Chad and Lori were present, you said?
Yes.
Did anything happen after the podcast?
Yeah, Chad said that he wanted wanted us to go to lunch because he had some information to give me during the lunch.
And did you in fact go to lunch?
Yes, I did.
Who else was present at the lunch?
Lori, Gibb, Chad, and I.
Did Chad end up telling you anything at that time?
Not at the time. For some reason, Lori and Chad didn't want Gibb to hear what he had to say to me. So during the lunch, he said that he had some things that he wanted to share with me and that he would call me later to let me know what that was.
And did you in fact talk to him later?
Yes,
And did he share something with you?
yes.
And can you tell me a little bit about what he shared with you?
He told me that he was able to read people's past lives and he wanted to give me, I guess it was like a reading of what my past lives were. And so he gave me all the times that I had been upon the earth before. He told me who I was, about when it had been. And then he also gave me a rating of, I think it was something like a 4.2 light or something similar to that.
And Your Honor, I have what's been marked as State's Exhibit 54A. I have a copy for counsel, a courtesy copy for the court, and then the exhibit.
Very well.
And may I have the witness shown the exhibit?
You may.
Ms. Pastenis, do you recognize this?
Yes,
Is this something that you created?
yes.
Did you create this sometime after Chad had talked to you about the prior lives?
Yes, this was something similar to what he had given me on that day. This is what Lori and Chad were teaching in regards to creations.
And I'm going to stop you just briefly, Your Honor. I'm going to move for admission of State's Exhibit 54A.
Any objection?
Judge, I guess for demonstrative purposes, it's fine.
Ms. Blake? Are you moving to admit for demonstrative purposes?
No, I'm moving to admit as an exhibit. Ms. Pastenis has said she created this based off the teachings of Chad and Lori.
All right, so it's not being offered demonstrative, just as an exhibit, so any objection on that?
No, Judge, if it's understood that she created this, I'm fine with that.
Very well. The exhibit 54A is admitted.
And Your Honor, permission to publish, please.
You may publish.
And Ms. Pastenis, I apologize. I cut you off there. I think you were starting to explain what we were seeing here. Can you please do so?
So Chad and Lori were teaching that in one realm of creations, there could be 5 different worlds to which one person could come to. So on this one, for example, it shows that there is one realm and one realm of creations on the left-hand side. And as you can see, it has 5 circles. So each one of those ones would be a world. And To the left, I have a arrow showing the spirit world, and one person could come to any of these worlds, and he had said that I had come to the third world within this creation 5 times. To the fourth world, I had come 4 times, and to the fifth world, which will be the earth, which was also the lowest and the darkest of the worlds within this creation, that I had come to this earth 4 times.
And I also see a note there, Brother H.F. Jesus. Could you explain what that was?
Yeah, one time, Chad had said that he was the brother of Heavenly Father and Jesus, and that in another creation, he had been the Holy Ghost.
And I also see a circle there with the word limbo. Could you explain what that represents?
Later on, they started teaching that a person could become let me back up. When a person passes away, that there was a small time where the body is still a viable body, and it could be occupied by a dark spirit or a demon, and that because the body no longer had the spirit that was originally there, but it was being occupied by a demon, that then that spirit could not move to the spirit world, that it would go into a limbo.
So the original spirit occupying the body would go to limbo?
Correct.
And when you say they were teaching, who is the they?
Chad and Lori.
Had you ever heard anything taught like that before?
No.
At that time, were you open to the idea?
Somehow it was really different to me. I've never heard anything like that before. I was sort of open to it.
Had you heard of some of the concepts before of prior creations or multiple probations?
I mean, I've heard some things being said about reincarnation and things like that, but never in this manner.
Your Honor, I have what's been marked as State's Exhibit 54. Again, I have a courtesy copy for Your Honor, the exhibit, and a copy for counsel. And if I may have the witness handed a copy.
You may.
And Ms. Pastenis, can you please just look through those pages?
Have a brief sidebar with counsel, please.
Yes. Ms. Pastenis, have you had a chance to look those pages over?
Yes.
And do you recognize those?
Yes, I do.
Where did they come from?
These pages come from a journal I used to keep.
And do you remember approximately, well, let me back up. Do these contain information provided to you by Chad and Lori?
Yes.
So would you have started putting this in sometime after having met Chad and Lori?
Yes.
And do you know when you quit making these journal entries in particular?
This journal was probably finished around 2019.
Thank you. And Your Honor, I would move for admission of State's Exhibit 54.
Any objection?
Foundation judge, 2019 is a long year. I should be afforded some opportunity as to when these entries were made.
All right, response, Ms. Blake?
Your Honor, Ms. Pastenis has identified them as her journal entries. She's indicated they would have been made in the year 2019. I think that is sufficient foundation for purposes of identifying the document and substantiating it.
All right, the court's considered the objection and the response. I am going to overrule the objection and permit the admission of Exhibit 54 based on foundation laid by the witness.
Your Honor, permission to publish.
You may publish.
And Ms. Pastenis, if I can draw your attention down there to the bottom, it says 3 phases. I think you were talking a little bit about that.
Yes.
Can you tell us what that represents?
So this is what Chad was teaching on that evening of after the preparing of people November of 2018. He said that the translation phases were emotional, spiritual, and physical. Each one of them would go from 0 to 100%, and vibrations will go from 0 to 1,000%, I think it was. And he also shows that around 80%, there is a big test in order for you to get to the 100%, and then you move on to the next phase.
And in the time you knew Chad Daybell, would he in fact tell you vibration levels that you had?
Yes,
And did he tell you that you were going through the translation process?
yes.
And we'd previously seen another diagram where you talked about creations. Can you tell us what this is representative of?
So this right here is representative of one of those circles on that entire creation. So for example, this right here will be all of the times that a person comes to one of the worlds. So for example, this one would be Earth. And this is how a person moves up in a spiritual ascend and becomes either 1 or 2 or 3, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and so on the light side, or as I have on the left-hand side, the same happens for a person if they become dark.
And so when Chad was telling you this stuff, I think you said you were given a rating of 4.2 light.
I believe that's what it was.
Who would give those ratings?
Chad would.
Who could discern light and dark?
Chad did.
And Your Honor, may I hold on to this exhibit? I intend to publish a few more, just not right now.
You may. Thank you.
Ms. Pastenes, do you recall where you went to lunch with Melanie and Chad and Lori?
Firebird's restaurant in Gilbert, Arizona.
Sometime after that first lunch, did you go to a lunch there again?
Yes.
Who was present at that lunch?
Gib, Lori, and I.
Do you recall approximately when that would have been?
I believe it was around February of 2019.
At some point, did Lori end up leaving Arizona?
Yes,
Do you recall approximately when she left Arizona?
it was after that lunch. So probably February, March.
And Chad was not present during that lunch, is that correct?
Correct. He was not there.
During that lunch, did Lori start telling you anything?
Yes, she made a diagram similar to the one that that I had written down, and she went over the creations and the worlds, and also the ratings of people.
And Your Honor, I have what's been marked as State's Exhibit 54B. I have a copy for the court, counsel, and a courtesy copy for Your Honor.
Thank you.
And if I may have the witness shown the exhibit.
You may.
Ms. Pastenes, what did Lori draw the diagram on?
It was on the receipt of the lunch.
And when you look at these pages, do you recognize them?
Yeah, this is a copy of the back of the receipt because I remember I kept the receipt.
And Your Honor, I would move for admission of State's Exhibit 54B.
No objection.
All right, Exhibit 54B is admitted.
And if I may have that for publication.
Yes.
And so as you said, this is indicating the same type of information.
Yes.
Is this also about your prior lives?
No, I don't believe that this one is, excuse me. This one has to do again with the eternal rounds up on the top. The five worlds that one can come to. And on the bottom part is how Chad used to rate people on whether they were light or dark. So you become a 1. So we're reading from the bottom up. You become a 1 when you're in the spirit world. And then you become a 2 when you are born for the first time. And then you become a 3 when you come again, and so on and so forth. And then she put the numbers of people that would be a 2 or a 3 and so on and so forth upon the earth currently. So for example, there's I think it says billions of twos, billions of three. Only 1,200 people are 4.1 light, 4.1 light, excuse me. There's only 7,000 4.2. There is only 700 4.3. And then there would be only 1/6 light, or only one person that is 6 dark on the opposite side.
So equal number of light and dark on each level.
Yes.
And then this was also part of that same receipt.
Yes.
And can you tell us what this is depicting?
So she, Lori at this time started explaining that there were councils. And so at the top would be Heavenly Father, Jesus Christ. Then right after that, there will be a council of 12, a council of 24, a council of 48, and then so on and so forth.
Do you know where Lori was getting her information?
All of this was being given to her by Chad.
And when we talked about those different creations, did Chad ever talk to you about the term exalted?
Yes.
And what did Chad explain to you when it came to being exalted?
So exaltation means that you have had a probationary time, and you have become a righteous person, spiritually minded, and that you are through the atonement of Jesus Christ, you are exalted. That means that you have earned or have a place in a celestial realm.
And had you heard that type of teaching before?
Yes, I have. It is taught in the church that we can become exalted, but the way that Chad was teaching it was different. He was teaching that if you came in another world within that creation, within those 5 worlds, if you came in another world, let's say, for example, when I came in the 4th world 4 times, during that time, I had become exalted. Therefore, I had already have my place in a celestial realm. So when I came to this earth this time, I didn't need to go through a probationary time. My place was already there. I already had it. So it wasn't really a probationary time for me to be here, that I had, for example, come to just help and assist the work of God.
And if you weren't in a probationary period, did that mean anything else? Or did you ever hear Lori or Chad say anything in relation to that?
Yeah, it would mean, Chad said that there wouldn't be a need for repentance if you had already been exalted in another world, that you did not need to go through a probationary time because you had already proven yourself in another world. Therefore, it didn't count for you. So Lori used to say all the time, it doesn't count for me. Or she would say, for example, to me or to other people, she was saying, it doesn't count for you either. And she would do it in such a way where she would hit something and she would say, doesn't count for me.
And again, where was Lori getting her information?
All this information is coming from Chad.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask for permission to publish some additional pages from State's Exhibit 54.
You may.
And I think on that back of the receipt,